Good morning and welcome to Tree of Life School of Ministries. We appreciate all of you being here today and taking the time to, whatever day this is for you on the World Wide Web, to view this. I sent out an email asking how many people wanted the videos to continue, and the majority of people said they prefer the video on the class, so I'm going to continue with that. Just be aware that it takes an entire day to get that thing processed, so it's usually going to be on Monday afternoon or something like that where it's viewable. So we're continuing our study of the Virtuous Woman Experience. In this chapter, chapter 9, we're talking about she binds her consciousness with the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. The King James says that she girdeth her loins with strength, and we know your loins always speaks of your reproductive organs. And our body are what needs to produce the nature and character and the man-child in the book of Revelation is our conscious awareness, our brain. Our brain needs to allow that to take place. And so we're feeding on this to educate ourselves, not just intellectually, but spiritually. We want to learn the truth, and so we're continuing with this. Last week, I don't know if I ended up in this last chapter, or last part of the first few pages of chapter 9, but it's important for us to understand that we have a man, which is our spirit. We are a man. The Bible says, greater is he that's within you than he that's within the world. And that's talking about the part of you that's within you, which is your mind of Christ, or the very Spirit of God. And then the part of you that's in the world system is the brain. Would you agree with that? That's really what it's talking about. Most people think it's talking about Jesus and a devil, but it's just talking about the brain is very much still in the world system. We still lean too much to the five sense realm. And we all have things that happen to us that hurt us, that cause us to cry, that produces fear and things like that. And we have to continue to say, you know what, that's not of me. That's not really who I am. And you have to resist that kind of stuff. And so we have a brain with a consciousness being the female part of us. So when the woman, the consciousness, puts on Christ, that's when we really give birth to the very nature of Jesus Christ. I was able to share with a lady, I think it was yesterday, and I was enjoying seeing her have an aha moment, but I was talking to her about what it means to put on and what the name means, that Jesus' name. It was at Walmart when it happened. And I was talking to her about when Jesus said he gave us his name, that he actually gave us his nature. And she never had heard that before. And I didn't either prior, because I always prayed, all my prayers I ended in the name of Jesus, because that was kind of like our tag. If you didn't say the name of Jesus, then it really wasn't a prayer. So now we know that he gave us his nature, and he told us to pray in his nature, and everything we do to do in his nature. And so we want that nature to come forth in us. We want it to birth in us. And I do believe that will affect the physical body. I believe the body will respond. There is a law, a natural law, called the cause and effect. You ever heard of that? Cause and effect. Now, we don't have to go by that law because we're spirit. But until we learn to lean to the Spirit, there is a cause and there is effect. And the cause of all of our problem is what's in the brain. The effect is sickness, disease, and poverty in every realm of life, or a sense of lack in every realm of life. Because whatever we continue to think in our brain, in our intellect, that's what the body's going to respond to, right? Because the body should be getting its information from the Spirit. The body should be getting its true supply from the mind of Christ. It should be getting everything that needs to be sustained from the mind of Christ, because we know that we have all things that pertain to life and godliness. And where is that? That's in our mind of Christ. And literally it's in every cell of our being, if you would. So at the beginning of my growth process, my thoughts were not perfectly in union with the mind of Christ. I really didn't understand what it meant to be the mind of Christ. In my studies last night and early this morning, I should have known this, but I only found one verse in my PC Bible study when I did a search. Only one verse that talked about us having the mind of Christ, and that was in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, which we're going to look at a little bit. But I didn't totally understand that. I'd heard it a lot, but because I was more interested in, I guess if you could say, carnal things, or the carnal world, I did not really understand spiritual things. I tried to understand spiritual things, but I tried to do that with a natural, carnal-minded mindset, and it just didn't work, so I couldn't grasp these things. I was only aware of the physical, and that was a sad fact, really. It really was, and it's a sad fact for most Christians, because, and when I say Christians, people who call themselves Christian are believers because they came and they wanted to know the Lord, but they were fed a lot of law and legalism. Would you agree with me? And a lot of carnally minded thinking. People would study the Word of God and take it to be a fact, the King James Version to be a fact, and like Brother Butch always says, after all, it's in the red, so we just assumed that Jesus was making a law when he was actually adding to their law. He was saying, if you want a law, I'll give you a law. You know, he was trying to convince people that you can't do it by the law. And so they never become conscious of spiritual things, and that's what our desire is at Tree of Life Ministries International, at Destiny Life Center, is we want to help people grow with us to where we become more and more conscious of spiritual things. And when we mean things, we're talking about the great salvation of our Father. You know, when it talks about all these things will be added to you, people still think that means wealth and health and everything else. It's not really talking about that. It's talking about the things that Jesus did. And if all that's added in my conscious mind and my understanding, then it will release all things that pertain to life and godliness in me. Whether it's coming from within or whether it's coming from out, it just releases that to you. Dawn and I had an interesting experience yesterday. She was trying on some clothes at a store and she lost a beautiful, what is it called, amethyst, your stone? I always call it amethyst. What was it?
Sapphire. A
sapphire that I had bought her for her birthday last year that she was very much enjoyed. And she had lost it. The metal prong broke, or the gold prong broke, and she had lost it. She had been at Target, she had been in 2 different parking lots, and at another store. And in the natural sense, it's just hopeless. You're not going to find it. You know, where she parked at, there was drains there. It could have been driven over by a tire and gone into the, I was just thinking all those places it could have gone. It could have gone into the tire's treads, no to anything. But then I began to remember years ago, Pastor J.C. Hibbert told us about a time that he was flying to Dallas and he lost a diamond out of his ring in an airplane. And he looked and looked and couldn't find it. And he was in Dallas for several days. He got on a plane to fly back home, and he was in a chair, a seat in the back of the plane, not knowing that it was the very same plane that he had flown there on. And he looked down, and right there was his diamond, you know, in his seat. And I was always amazed with that. And the Lord reminded me of that. And so as we were going to Target and the other store, I just said, Lord, I believe that diamond is going to come back to that stone is going to come back to my wife. She wants it, she's hurting, she's upset about it, and I just said, Lord, I believe it's going to come back to her. So we go looking for it, and she'd called the dress store, and they said, well, we looked in there, it's not there. We looked real good, it's not there. And so we decided to go ourselves, and after looking everywhere and just thinking, okay, it's, you know, we can't find it, Donna walks into that store, goes back there into that dressing room, and Lena, right there it was in the middle of the carpet. And they just said, well, we looked, it wasn't there, you know, but it was there. And I just believe, you may think, well, that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. I believe that the Spirit of God can help us know all things, and it can help us. The devourer, if you want to say the devourer, which is losing things, can be swallowed up. And we don't have to get there. So we want to get in that state of life, which is spiritual life. We don't want to just stay in the earthly realm and have nothing to look forward to. I feel sorry for people that have nothing to look forward to but dying, you know, and going to heaven someday. I've had people tell me, don't pray for them, because after all, we have to die from something so we can go to heaven. And their perception of saved is tainted by the religious systems of this world. People still don't understand what it means to possess, when it says have, to possess the very mind of Christ. And possess means, man, it's yours, it belongs to you. It's just like Donna with that stone. That was her stone. You know, she had a right to have it. I gave it to her, and so it was difficult for her. And when we found it, you should have seen the peace of mind that came over her, you know, or mind of peace or whatever. But she felt so much better because what belonged to her came to her. And so I believe people are going to feel a whole lot better when we teach them what belongs to them and they possess it in their understanding. That makes sense? Yeah. You know, you could possess some things and not have an understanding. I'm not making fun of my wife, but we possess some computers and we possess some computer programs and we possess some remote controls, and she doesn't quite understand it, all right, Donna? Yet. You know, and the reason why is because she's always had me take care of it for her. But there needs to be more than just having it. You've got to possess it and understanding. When you possess something and understanding, then you can use it. You can live out of it, and it helps your life. So in this second session of chapter 9, we're studying in the Proverbs the characteristics and the attributes And I put down the powers, because there is a power from coming from knowing who you are and living out of that. And nature, the conscious of man who puts on Christ. So we have all this, but we must put on. And that's what we're after, is the knowledge of putting this on. And when we put this on and understanding, literally that's when we live out that very infinite awareness of who we are and what Father has done. So I want to read Proverbs 31:10 up to the verses that we read thus far. And by the way, we're not going to go through every verse in this study. I'm going to be, the next chapter that we do will be the end of it, because there's other things we're going to go on to. But it says, who could appear as? See, we already are, but we need to appear as, right? Who could appear as, come forth and be present, rise up as, and manifest the Christ's life? For the price of that life far more precious than pearls. That's what the word rubies mean, is pearls. And Jesus, talking about the pearl, it was the pearl of great price. And somebody asked me before, do I not think that's us? Well, we're in union with him. So yes, it would be us and also him. Jesus became the pearl. The feelings, the will, and intellect of Father safely trusts and has confidence in her as the means of her living as spirit. And that's talking about the brain of man, as the plural of him. So in other words, our brain will be the plural of the mind of Christ, right? Yes. I have a hard drive in my computer, but I also have another hard drive that is the plural of that. I plugged it in, and everything that's in my computer, I have dragged into that other hard drive, so they're both the plural. They have the exact same information. If there's mistakes in this hard drive, then there's mistakes in that hard drive. It has the exact same. And so to me, that's just a great way of picturing that my brain must begin to draw from the Spirit, because in the Spirit there is no lie. In the Spirit there is no misinformation. The Spirit is nothing but truth. And the truth will do what? If the truth comes, it will make me free. So let's say the truth is in my hard drive. Or let's just say this. I've taken my external hard drive that I carry with me that has everything in it that's in my hard drive in my computer. Linda, do you know what a hard drive is?
Yeah.
It's what you store everything in. And so I'm traveling, and I go through this external hard drive, and I begin to look, and I say, oh, there's a mistake here, and there's a mistake here, and this was the wrong spelling, and this is the wrong grammar, and so I correct it, right? Well, when I come home, I take this external hard drive, and I drag it into my internal hard drive, and I say replace. And what does it do? It replaces all the wrong information. And so that's what we're doing, in a sense, if that's a good picture for you, is we're taking the mind of Christ, which has all truth, and we're leaning to it, and we're saying, replace that which is not true. And it's coming in there and replacing that which is not true. So, I hope I took that little lamb's trail there, but I think it helps a lot. So the feelings, the will, and intellect of Father safely trusts and has confidence in her as the means of her living as spirit, as the plural of him. He will have no lack of gaining concerning his purpose in her life. She lives as his plural and not as man whose intellect comes from the physical sense realm, or you can call it the sensual realm, all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. In other words, she feeds on the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The awakened new man, roused up in success from a state of non-existence as Christ the new man, while many have not awakened to the light of life and revelation, and gives substantially the bread and wine of the gospel. In other words, she gives it out, right? And gives substantially the bread and wine of the gospel, the revelation of Jesus as humanity, crucified, died, and buried, and Christ the new man resurrected to new life. To all family, nations, and kindred of every kind, every one of Father, being her appointment to the immature. So see, we're appointed, and mature, some people have a hard time with me saying we need to mature, we need to grow up. It's not saying that you're bad people. It's not saying that I was bad, but I need to grow up. I still need to grow up. There's still things in my life that I act immature about. So there's nothing wrong with saying, family, we need to mature. We're not putting people down. We always say we, not you, right? I don't think I've ever said you need to mature. I say we need to mature. So the immature who live as mere men whose understanding comes from the five sense realm. People always say, well, why is this happening in my life? Why are bad things? Why are we always sick? Why is this? Why is that? Well, it's because we're still living sensual. Yes. We're still living out of the five sense realm. Being those who have not awakened to righteousness as of yet. Verse 16. She considers a field or the world by understanding Jesus reconciled all men. So that's very important. I love that chapter, as we look and we see people and we say, guess what? Reconciled, reconciled, reconciled. Righteous, righteous, righteous. Holy, holy, holy. Altogether lovely. That's a mature person will see people that way. I saw some pictures yesterday about bringing hope to humanity, and I loved it. There was a gay pride parade somewhere, and most religious establishments stand there and bash them and condemn them to hell and everything else, but there was a whole bunch of believers that stood there and apologized for how the church has treated them. Had signs and said, we're sorry for how you treated. One said, I used to be a Bible thumper and accusing, and I'm sorry, please forgive me. And one of the guys went over and wept in their arms.
Yeah.
And I tell you, Pastor Butch last week was talking about, he was reading the scripture in the Bible where it said men begin to seek after men and lust after men, and women begin to, and all this stuff. And I immediately heard in my mind, looking for love in all the wrong places.
Right.
Yes.
And God was telling me, they're looking for me.
Yes.
But because the church hasn't shown me,
That's right.
They're looking for love somewhere else. Because the majority of the church world, did they really accept people when they walked into their doors? Did they really?
No.
We used to sing the song, come as you are, just as I am. You know, but when they got in there, what did we do? We started trying to change them. We started teaching that they're sinners and all that stuff. And the Lord just spoke that to me strong, that they're looking, only thing wrong with people is they're looking for love in all the wrong places. And so we need to show them the love of Christ. They're supposed to know us by our love one for another, but Lord of mercy, have we seen that in the religious establishments very much? Not really. So she considers a field, and she sees the truth of that field. Verse 17, she continues to put on the mind of Christ, because it's a continuing thing. You can't stop, family. It's the never-ending gospel of Jesus Christ. You constantly feed on the death, the burial. You constantly feed on the Pauline revelation. We have the entire Old Testament to go to see this. That you really don't have to search after anything else. The Bible is full of pictures of the redemptive work of Jesus Christ. We have the book on the Pauline revelation is seen in the New Testament, and then we have one in the Old Testament, and that one's just going to get thicker and thicker and thicker. It's probably going to be volume after volume after volume, showing all these pictures of the Pauline revelation in the Old Testament. So she continues to put on the mind of Christ and walks in his awareness, and as a result she is strengthened, or she oozes with the glory of God. That's what it said in the Greek. She oozes with the glory of God. I don't know what Brother Brother Hibbard was thinking one day, but he told people, he said, Roy just oozes with the word. And I thought, well, thank you for that prophecy.
Yes.
But that last part is what Kay wrote, is that she oozes with the glory of God. So she girds herself. She girds her loins with strength, with understanding. We're talking about our understanding what we believe. It's so important for us to stay in a continual process of girding ourselves and feeding our conscious mind the truth of the Word and allowing the very Spirit of God to move in us. One characteristic of a spiritually mature person is they are strong in understanding of what Jesus did. I used to ask people years ago, and it came from Brother Garner, but he told us what is the sign of spiritual maturity. And I've had people tell me because somebody talks in tongues a lot and prays a lot that they're spiritually mature. I've had people tell me because they can interpret dreams they're spiritually mature, and they function in the gifts of the Spirit that they're spiritually mature. We go to conferences all over the place and you see people that are very charismatic and they can get people laughing and having fun and, you know, give scripture and all this, and they think that's spiritually mature. But spiritual maturity is how much you know about the redemptive work of Jesus Christ. That's what spiritually mature is how much you know and how you let that affect your life. What he did for mankind and what it meant to the entire race of mankind, not just for people that walk in church buildings. So, what I'm going to do here is we first want to look at the effect that Adam's wrong choice caused. Adam left the people of him before the resurrection of Jesus with a sense of separation in the thought realm. And Paul taught much about that subject. But now we know it was a sense of separation because we understand that they were never separated from God. Like my son and my daughters and my grandchildren and my future great-grandchildren, they can think that they can separate themselves from me, but they cannot. One of them can grow up and say, you know what, I don't like my papa. You know, I don't want anything to do with my papa. He's not my papa, but you know what, it doesn't matter what they say, they're still mine. I've had times with my children where I just wanted to wear their little butts out, you know. And as adults, I've had times where I get upset with them sometimes. But you know what? They're mine. They're of me. I could never separate myself from my family. I love them. I love them very much. Now, sometimes you have to love from afar. Any of you been there before? But they're still ours. You can't separate yourself from that. So what happened, and we know that Adam, something happened to Adam. I had somebody write me about it the other day, and I don't totally understand all of it, but I know in the book of Genesis it says that the serpent spoke to him, and the serpent means a thought. It's a thought in the consciousness of man, and it meant hiss or whisper, and it began to, that voice in his mind began to cause him to separate himself from Father and begin to learn from his own experience. Right? The word is nakash. And so Adam separated himself, and in that separation, he left the realm of spirit. He no longer was walking with God in the spirit of the day, and he told God the reason he hid from him is because he was naked. And what did God say to him? Who told you that? Have you been eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Have you decided to discern for yourself what is good and what is bad? So he saw what he did as bad, and when you see what you do as bad, you separate yourself from who you are. Is that right? I mean, if I go out and eat a gallon of ice cream, you know, let's just say if I go out and I commit what the world calls a sin, a real sin, I'm going to say, well, then how can I be who God says I am? How can this be true of me? Because people say that all the time. They hear us get up and say you're righteous and you're holy and you're altogether lovely, but they say, their brain says to them, but you don't know me. You don't know what I've done. You don't know what's inside of me. But you know what? That doesn't matter. That's not who you are. That's what's in your brain, and it came from your religious upbringing. It came from your environment that you grew in. It came from choices that you made, but it's not who you are. And see, that's the problem in the world today. And in the church world today, is there are a lot of people that are caught up in carnal things, in sensual things, if you would, looking for love in all the wrong places, and they believe that God created them that way because that's the only way they can deal with it. The church won't teach them the truth. All the church teaches them is quit, 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 or you're damned to hell because of what you do. And so in order to have any kind of sanity at all, they convince themselves that God made me this way. And then they have preachers that love God and understand the grace of God and understand reconciliation, but they still don't understand yet that none of us are manifesting the pure nature of Christ. And so they build denominations around, I'm okay, you're okay. And they think it's about when we die going to heaven, to a planet called heaven. Yes, baby?
They don't think they're worthy of God's love or anybody else's love.
That's true.
You know.
So they have to get off to themselves and love themselves.
They just keep repeating the same thing because they don't think they're worthy of anything different.
Right. And they want that. You know, they get out on the streets and march and do other things, and I'm not talking about any particular people. I'm talking about anybody.
Yeah.
I'm talking about anybody. They try to fight for love, but man whose breath is in his nostrils, man who's sensual, cannot give you that kind of love. They cannot, the man that has a religiously infected mindset cannot love a person that's in their mind living in sin, right? It's not possible for them. But they who are spiritual, in other words, they who lean from the Spirit, then they can do that. They can embrace people. And that's why we say at Destiny Life Center, we welcome everybody. Come, feed with us. Please don't practice whatever it is that you're struggling with in our fellowship. Whatever it is, we don't want you to practice that, and we don't want you to try to pull people that way. But if we can all come and dine, and we can all feed and see, I'm doing it. There's things that's been in my life that I've had to lay my head on the chopping block of the Word and say, Lord, pour the truth in, and the truth will reveal what's wrong, not me. It's not my job, John, to tell you what's wrong in your life. Although I could do a pretty good job of it, religiously. We think we can. But it's not my job to do that. My job is to feed you the truth and butches, and feed you the bread and wine. And it's show the house. And when you recognize that you're not really manifesting the Christ nature, then the truth will free you of everything that's doing that, and you will just be who you already are. We're not doing this to become something because we already are. We're doing this to remove the hindrance, and the hindrance is the wrong information right up in our brain that came from the environment that we lived in, the choices we made, things that were done to us, things that were said about us, right? And mostly things that we believed.
What we perceive about ourselves.
We perceive ourselves wrong. And so we need that strength inside of us. And so there is that sense of separation that we must free people from. In Ephesians 2:1, it states, and ye, in your King James it says, and you he made alive, or does it say quicken in your scripture? Are you reading it in King James? Probably not. And it states, and you he made alive who were dead in trespasses and sin. They added that quickened or whatever it said there. I think it says made alive.
Mine's not in there.
See, they took it out. In your Bible, they take a lot of those added words out. But they added that made alive because, see, Paul wasn't talking of the state that people were in at that time. Does that make sense to you? He was talking about the state that mankind was in before Jesus' resurrection. But the way that they wrote it in the King James, it makes people think that we're still just sinners saved by grace.
Yeah.
And I saw a post on Facebook this morning that really saddened me. This man said, we are not saved. We will not be saved until the rapture. He says we are being saved. And I just thought, oh God, help us. Help the world. Help the, quote, people call themselves the church. They don't have any understand. I am saved in the truest sense of the word. Paul said we are. We have been rescued from everything that Adam released, and that is no longer a power. I'm not being saved. I'm getting the correct information in my mind.
Right.
Yes.
And yet, but I didn't comment because it's not worth fighting over. So notice he said, you were dead. He was saying the condition of humanity before the cross was dead. Now see, we would think that means I'm just dead. I used to teach that man before the cross had no spirit in them. And I used to believe that even until you, quote, got saved, that you had no spirit in you. That you was dead. And then I believe that when you, quote, said a sinner's prayer, that instantly God put his spirit back in man. And that was the biggest lie there ever was. But that's what I was taught. With God, what is dead? Dead is no knowledge, no understanding. There are people in the United States of America are dead to the fact that they have a right to pursue happiness. They're dead to the fact that they can be anything they want. John, I'm 62. You're not 60 yet, are you? But we're pretty mature in age. We could go be doctors today.
Absolutely.
We could go be scientists today. I could go to college right now and spend 6, 7, 8 years and be anything I want to be. Anybody. But there are people dead to that. Why? Because what they believe up here, I'm not smart, I can't do it, I can't afford it, I can't, and it's all about them. But my Bible says I can do all things through the life of God inside of me that strengthens me. You know, Dawn and I bicker back and forth all the time. I would love to see her teach. I'd love to see her teach women. I know she's got it inside of her, and she's always saying, I can't, and I always say, you can. You know, I'm not trying to shape her, but I can't stand it when people say, I can't, because you can. But you don't do it out of your natural intellect. You do it out of your mind of Christ, right? And so that's what dead means. Generation after generation of teachers and preachers have used this verse to prove the fact that man was spiritually dead until he prayed a sinner's prayer, and there's no such thing as a sinner's prayer in your Bible. This is not talking about some past life or some current life. Paul was instructing people who did not know who they were. After the cross, after Jesus' resurrection, family, very few people knew what Jesus had done. Even the disciples didn't understand it. He said, I have tried to tell you, I've tried to explain these most holy place things to you, and you can't bear them. In other words, you let them slip between your fingers because you're still thinking as carnal. You're still wanting me to be your earthly king. You still want me to destroy the Roman Empire. You still want me to do miracles and make bread for you and all that stuff, and you can't get it. But, be of good cheer. I'm going to go away, but I'm going to put my spirit in you, and my spirit is going to lead you and guide you in all truth. And yet they still didn't know what to do with that. And even the modern day church thinks that you get spirit filled someday, and it's all about talking in tongues, all about spiritual gifts and all that, and it is not. The day of Pentecost, I'm sorry if some people disagree with me, but the Pentecost realm is the realm of learning, intense feeding. John, the Apostle John, was in the Spirit.
Yes, he will.
And he was in the most holy, he was in the holy place in God's economy. And he was feeding on the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. God was giving John the revelation they wrote in the book of Revelation. He gave him all that as he was feeding. He was feeding on Jesus crucified and man crucified, and Jesus died and humanity died and all that. And as he fed, he began to have eyes to see and ears to hear. And what did he do? He turned around and he saw Christ. He saw not Jesus in the church. He saw the very life of God in man again. He saw
In
that.
the midst of the candle.
Huh?
In the candle.
Yeah, it was the candle. And the Bible says that the candle, just a few verses later, said it's the church. And the church is not this building. The church is not a religious establishment. It's all people. There was a church in the wilderness that was people, right?
That's right.
And so it's something that there's an intense feeding that takes place. And so, again, people possess very little knowledge of that. He also taught that they possessed all understanding in their true mind. Not the organ called the brain, but in the mind of Christ. Because of lack of knowledge, and not that there was no knowledge, but because they rejected knowledge, they and we have in times past been dead and missing the mark. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Dead and missing the mark. The reason we missed the mark is because we didn't know who we were. You know, I read scripture from you a few weeks ago. Have you not heard? Have you not known? No, I didn't. And there's another scripture that says, how can they hear, how can they understand unless a preacher's been sent? And not just a preacher that gets his license from a biblical college somewhere, but it's a preacher with a message. You can't be a messenger without the message, right?
Right.
And there's too many people been going out there saying, I'm the messenger of God, and they don't even know the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, not that the knowledge was not there, but man did not know. They had the very life of God in them. I didn't understand that. So in 1 Corinthians 2:16, I'm just going to talk about that, and we're going to go through the whole chapter, is the only verse that I found, and I may be wrong, but it's the only verse that I found last night that said used the phrase, the mind of Christ. You would think there would be more, wouldn't you? And there may be. I'm going to do some more research when I get home. But you know what? There's only one verse in the Bible that says we are seated together with Him in heavenly. Not heavenly places. They added the word places. People still quote that all the time. Please don't quote that. It was added. It's not a place out there in the sweet by and by. It's in you. When you look at the word heavenly, it says the abode of God. And where does God live? He lives in me.
Well,
Right?
yeah.
And so there's only one verse that says seated, which means rest. So it says we are at rest with God inside of us. We're the plural of God, right? So very highly likely that there's only one verse that says we have the mind of Christ. Now, the word mind is 3564, and it's nous. It's pronounced N-O-O-C-E. It's N-U-O-S. And it's the intellect, the understanding, are from the Greek word gnosko, which means to know, be aware, perceive, be resolved, can speak of, and be sure. Where is that? That's in our mind of Christ. Where is it coming to? In our brain and our intellect. Many of us are beginning to speak these truths. I can speak them. My brain is more and more equipped with the mind of Christ. I haven't totally got there yet where all it ever thinks about, but I'm telling you what, I'm light years ahead of where I was 10, 15, 20 years ago. I was talking to Sister Wanda Budden. If you get a chance, call her this week and encourage her. She's doing better, but she's missing coming here. But I was talking to her, and she was telling me how she thought she was really getting it, and then all of a sudden she gets hit with the cataracts, and she got an infection in her ear, or equilibrium's off. And I said, Wanda, that has nothing to do with it. Just go back 10 years ago and see where you were then and where you are now.
6 months. Oh.
You're not failing. We're all growing together. We all have our own struggles. I'm not free from wanting vanilla ice cream yet. I'm sorry. That's my sin. It's a joke for those of you that think I'm crazy. I just don't want to talk about sins anymore, or what the church calls sins. But in us is the ability to speak. In my wife is the ability to stand up and teach women, and teach men, and teach children, and teach people at Walmart. And in you is the ability. We have to learn to lean to that, and we have to, Lennon, and I'm thankful what you've said before, but we have to quit saying, I can't.
That's right.
Right.
We had to quit identifying with what happened to us.
Right.
Oh.
Honest to God, it doesn't matter if your mama dropped you upside down on your head. The life of God can bypass that.
Yes.
It can bypass that. If, like Pastor Butch said, Jesus was the Messiah, and one of the signs of the Messiah was to heal the leper. And he healed the leper. He healed 10 of them. And he said, go show yourself to the priest. And the priest got mad. Who did this?
Yeah.
And you did it on a Sunday? You know?
Oh, Lord Jesus.
So?
But if they had leprosy, Lena, Donna, if they had leprosy, what has God done to you? He didn't just heal you of that disease. He healed you of everything that Adam released. Just like my uncle, man. He had a tumor in his brain that kept him from being able to talk. But the very Spirit of God prayed the most beautiful prayer language through him over me. That, to me, was awesome. An awesome picture how the mind of Christ is not affected by physical ailments, if we can call it that way, or lack of information. So we can speak, and then the word Christ is not Jesus' last name.
That's right.
Jesus
Yeah.
was Jesus. He was a man just like me and you, but he was the Messiah. He was God's only Son on planet Earth, manifesting the life of God. But everyone was God's son.
Amen.
I'll say it again. He was the only Son on planet Earth in his earth walk, manifesting the life of God, but everybody was the Son of God. But they didn't know who they were. They had the life of God, but they wasn't manifested because they were never taught the truth. So the word Christ is Christos. It means anointed, and it comes from C-H-R-I-O, which means the idea of contact. In other words, to smear or rub. When I take a cream, a medication or whatever it is, and I rub it, it literally goes into my being, does it not?
Yes.
It absorbs into me. I have aspirin cream sometimes I put on my knee. It's a cream that has aspirin on it, and I rub it to where it needs to, and it goes right into me. So that's what Christ is. It's the very life of God, Lena, that was smeared into us. It was pushed into us, and it never has to go away. I don't have to have it put in me again. I can't lose it, right?
We absorb
It can't be taken away from me. We literally absorbed it, and it went into our very DNA. God put that in there. So the following that we're going to read here now is my translation of 1 Corinthians chapter 2. And I want to show the student a clear understanding of what the Apostle Paul intended when he wrote, "But we have the mind of Christ." In other words, this is the condition of man before the cross, but now this is who we are. And that's what the church has been teaching all along.
Yes.
Lord, I wish I would have heard this when I was a little boy.
Yes, absolutely.
I wish I would have heard this in my teenage years, who I am. All I ever heard was I was just a sinner saved by grace. All I ever heard is that Jesus died for me, and that's it. Well, it was much more than that, family. He died the death that was appointed to all humanity, and he swallowed up the death and the hell and the grave of living as human. Right? I would like to preach all this, but it would take too long. Let's just, real quick, we'll read each verse one at a time. Let's go to the King James first. And he said, "I, brethren, when I come to you, came not with excellency of speech, or of the wisdom declaring unto you the testimony of God." And what he said is, "And I, brethren, when I came to you, I came not with superiority or reputation." You know, they didn't like the Apostle Paul, right? In the beginning. The disciples didn't like that.
Right.
"So I had no reputation of reasoning among you, of carnal intellect, or the wisdom of this age, to teach and preach the once before secret of Father." That's mysterion. If you read our book on living out of our spiritual resources, the secret means our mystery is actually the secret. At one time it was a secret. What do you mean? It was people didn't understand it. So in a sense it was a secret. And then verse 2, "For I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and Him crucified." I love that verse. I'm glad the Apostle Paul put that there. But for the most part, most religious pastors and teachers and leaders never live out of that. Because they always wanted to know, like we brought Brother John to church, and people would start telling us how bad John was, and we just listened to him and judged him because of that. You know, John used to be this way, and John's doing that, and all that. Paul says, I don't want to know that. He said, "For I, by the grace of Father," and for those who read these for the first time, I don't want to call Father God. God is just a title. And God is not a body. God is not a he, but we say he for the lack of knowing what to say. So I put Father, Creator, Spirit.
Yes.
So that's why I do that. Some people say, I don't like how you put slashes on there. Well, I'm just trying to explain it over and over and over. So, for I, by the grace of Father, decided not to know. And see, it was the grace of God that he did that, right?
Right.
I decided not to know, be aware, behold, consider, have knowledge of, or speak of any action of any person among you, except for who they are, because of Jesus, the Anointed One, and his redemptive work. God, Father, help us to get there.
Yeah.
I so want to get to where I don't react. I so want to get where, John, if you, and I know you wouldn't, but if you said something bad to me, or you did something, or you say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with it anymore, I just want to be able to say, I love you, John.
That's right.
I just want to still know you as who you are. And just let God take care of whatever it is that's going on in your life. I mean, I so want to get there. Because reaction causes all kinds of problems. And then verse 3 in the King James, it says, and I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. I can tell you, family, when I first started teaching these things, Donna can tell you, when I went to preach at Ascension Life, I was there and fearful and trembling, and because I began to say some things that they wasn't saying, and it was scary. I can't imagine what the Apostle Paul was going through. Because everything he was saying, nobody had heard it yet.
Nobody.
And a lot of stuff we're saying, nobody's heard yet.
That's right.
And it's not just because of us, it's just we're hungry for the truth. And so he said, even though I possess great understanding, I was with you at that time without strength of my own. I feel that sometimes. I just think, Lord, how can I do this? Because I don't have any ability of my own. Prior to 1996, I didn't know much about the Word, or 1988 actually. I didn't know anything about the Word, did I, Donna? You know, I memorized some Scripture, and I sat under preaching, but until I met John Corson and Gary Garner, I didn't know anything. And so it wasn't my strength. And then they said, liberated of my previous dependence on my religious education. How was he liberated from that? He said, Father, deliver me from this. And what did God say to him? My grace is sufficient. So what is grace? What would grace be to you? The grace inside of you is the mind of Christ. That's what grace is. It's the mind of Christ. My grace is sufficient. Draw from the mind of Christ. And in fear of what I would be saying, and shaking with anxiety. I mean, you think you're scared. You should have been in the Apostle Paul's shoes. What was he? Beaten. He was shipwrecked. He was stoned. All kinds of stuff happened to him because he preached the gospel of Jesus Christ. And yet we get all upset because of rejection that we receive. Now, we have been stoned, but it's not physically, it's been words, right, Donna?
Yes.
And you will too, if you speak the truth. Verse 4. And my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit of power. And that is, furthermore, the word of truth in my proclamation, explanation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, was not with persuasive and alluring reasoning from worldly intellect, but in manifestation of my in Christ's Spirit, or mind of Christ, and of the great operation of Father God. Verse 5, is it all right doing it this way?
Yep.
Because you need to see the difference. Verse 5, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of man, but in the power of God. Now tell me, family, what is the power of God?
The gospel.
It's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Many people today make comments on Facebook about meetings that they've gone to, and they talk about the power of God was so strong, and it's always about people getting up out of wheelchairs, financial miracles, healings, words of knowledge. People think that's the power of God. It is not the power of God, because that doesn't change anybody. That's a bold statement to say. When you say, well, Roy, if you had cancer and you were healed, you would be changed. Yes, I would be affected by it, but I wouldn't be changed, because until I hear the truth, I'm going to get something else.
That's right.
Right?
But isn't that the result of truth?
If the truth is taught, but it's not a miracle, it's just, the miracle is living free from all that. The miracle is not having to have a healing. The miracle is not having to have a miracle in your life. That's the true miracle. That's where you just live out of it, and that's where we want to get to. And the only thing that can produce that is teaching the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ with clarity. And then verse 5, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Okay, excuse me, I already said that. So, in order that your reliance upon Jesus' perfect work of redemption not exist in carnal wisdom of men. Does that make sense? Remember, Scripture says without faith it's impossible to do what? What does it say?
Agree with God.
No, it said please in the King James, but it says without faith it's impossible to agree with God. So if you don't put your reliance upon Jesus' work, but you put it on the carnal wisdom of man, whose understanding comes in the 5 sense realm, living as human beings, not as Christ the new man, if you do that, family, then you're not going to agree with God, because God says you're righteous. But carnally minded ministers say, what do they say you are? You're sinners. Oh, but you can go to heaven because you said a sinner's prayer, but you're still sinners, right? Because they just say you're sinners, what? Saved by grace. But they still say you're sinners saved by grace. That's not true.
It's not true.
I am not a sinner saved by grace. I am righteous today. I'm holy today. I'm everything that Jesus came to do. I am that today, and you are too.
Yep.
So, not as Christ the new man, but in the miraculous, mighty, and wonderful operation of Father. Verse 6 in the King James. Howbeit we speak wisdom among them that are perfect. Now I think this is interesting that they put that are perfect. That's implying that some people aren't perfect. Would you see that there if you read that?
Mine says full grown.
Yeah, see, but
Full grown.
but how many people are? Everybody is. But they put to those that are perfect. What verse am I on? 6?
6.
Howbeit we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor of the prince of this world. Now who would people think the prince of this world was? A devil, right? That's what they were taught. But it was Adam. That comes to naught. So it says, moreover, we preach, teach, and explain spiritual truths in relation of rest in completeness. That's all it said. It's not saying to those who are perfect, or not to those who are grown up, or not. It says we do it in completeness. In other words, we leave nothing out. Right? Nothing held back. Yet not with lower realm wisdom of this age, nor the character and false nature of the first man Adam, that was rendered entirely idle, useless, abolished, brought to naught, put away, vanished away, and made void. And see that phrase there, that comes to naught? Guess what that word is? It's cardigeo. It's the same word where Jesus said, where it said of Jesus, for this purpose was the Son of Man manifest, to destroy him that had the power of death. And the King James said that as the devil, and it really was Adam, and the word destroyed is cardigeo. So he made void all that. And again, if you believe in a real entity called a devil, or demons, or Satan, or whatever, 2 places your Bible says that Jesus' redemptive work destroyed that. Made it void. Brought it to naught. Melted it away. Cardigeo in the Greek. It says it. Look it up. So if there was one, there is not one now. But there never was one. It was Adam. It was the first man, Adam. He's the one that released that state. I feel stones coming at me. John, will you get them? Help me. Verse 7. But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world unto our glory. That says, verse 7, properly we teach, we preach, and explain the infinite awareness of Father and His great work of redemption before a secret, and what I mean by this, before it was a secret to men who lived only by the 5 sense realm. John, you said this to me before when you first started studying with us. Why doesn't people see this? Why doesn't more people understand? Because most people are still living in the essential realm.
Yes.
Most people are still living by the 5 sense realm. We still do in many ways.
Yes.
We wake up in the morning and what do? We hurt, we take inventory of ourselves, and that's how we live all day long. Unless we shut it down. Unless we refuse to receive it. We pay attention to what other people are saying and other people are doing. And we let what they do in our life affect us. So that's living by your 5 senses. They don't like me. They're mean to me. They're doing things they shouldn't do. It just list goes on and on. So it's a secret to men who lived and still live by the 5 sense realm. The hidden and understanding operation which Father, Creator, Spirit predetermined before the ages to reveal our Christ life or our glory. Glory means our appearing, or the very weight of God. Now, where is it hidden today? And where was it hidden before? It's in the mind of Christ. It's in our spirit. And the reason it's hidden is because people don't know it's there.
That's right.
It's not hidden by God. You know, even in the Old Testament they were told to awake to righteousness. Isaiah said, arise and shine, for the glory of the Lord has come. That's Old Testament. He wasn't just prophesying in the future. He was telling people, you have the very glory of God. And some people, by faith, tapped into that. Abraham was made righteous. Why? Because of his faith. He was faithful. And we look at him and think, well, he wasn't faithful. He listened to his wife and he had the affair with Hagar and all that. But you know what? He was growing in his understanding. And I believe what God did with him when he told him to take his one and only son, Isaac, because God does not recognize your Ishmaels. Ishmael means wild ass. He doesn't recognize your wild ass things that you do. He only recognizes the truth. And my brother used to argue with me on this, and I think he believes it now. But when God told Abraham to take Isaac up, and then he stopped him from sacrificing him, he said, now I know. And many people will say, well, God was wanting to know if Abraham trusted him. And no, he was saying, now I know that you know.
Yes.
I know I can trust you, but you need to know I can trust you.
Right.
I really believe that with all my heart. That's what Father was saying. So, verse 8, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. And I think it's interesting that they put princes. If there was, you know, if most people think that a devil was the prince of this world, but guess what? Everybody was the prince of this world. You are the prince of this world. God is the king of the universes, and he's given us the world to rule over as him. So we are the prince of this world. There's many scriptures where it talks about the princes. So verse 8, not even one man, woman, boy, or girl of the first man Adam, and we're not of the first man Adam, right? Was aware, had knowledge of, could speak of, or understand. For had they known, they would not have crucified Jesus at the federal head of all humanity. Jesus became the prince of the world. Jesus was the federal head and became the prince of the world. But, verse 9, but as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man, the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. The translation that I have is, but as it is written, at that time, none would see with his or her spirit vision. They had no idea that they could see things like that. Nor gave audience to the voice of spirit, or even ascended in the consciousness of humankind, that which Father did in all of them, out of his own love. That's how he did that. He did that out of his own love. And today, that would apply today, because very few people really will listen to the voice of spirit that's saying, come and dine. And now it's the spirit in the bride saying, come and dine. Come up higher. And still many people can't or will not or refuse to. I think the reason they can't is because they're still listening to the lie. I always say we've been the children of a great lie that has caused a great sadness. Would you agree with me? You look at most people in the world today, there's been sadness in their life, and even believers. Correct? Don and I was talking about this the other day, how a person that can grow up in a home and love God but not be taught the truths that we're teaching today, their lives can end up being very sad, even though they believe in God, because they go the way of the world. There is a way that seems right to man, who is sensual man, who goes by their five senses, but the way thereof is destruction. And have we all been there? Yes. Every one of us have. And so we want to get out of that. What verse did I do? 9?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I already read that. Okay, verse 10. But God hath revealed unto us by what? By his Spirit. For the Spirit searches all things, yea, the deep things of God. So that says, now Father has disclosed and taken off the cover of spiritual blindness. And what was the cover? Religion, religious beliefs. The cover of the spiritual blindness for all people by helping us lean to our spirit for understanding. Indeed, the mind of Christ, which is our spirit, can speak of the whole salvation of Father, even the profound previous mystery of Father. It was a previous mystery before the Spirit of truth was sent, put back into man. Verse 11. I'd like to get done with this, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. For what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of man, which is in him? Even so the things of God knoweth no man, but the Spirit of God. Now, see, people see themselves separate from the Spirit of God, so they say, we can't know. All right? And that's not true. He says, for what human-minded, carnally infected person can perceive this whole salvation? So, John, that's why not everybody's seeing it. You look on Facebook, I mean, it's a perfect example. Many people on there are still functioning carnally minded. They don't have a carnal mind, but they're still, their belief system has come from a carnal sense realm teaching. And if they're Baptist, they believe Baptist. If they're Assembly of God, they believe Assembly of God. If they're Lutheran, they believe a Lutheran. Whatever denomination it is, and people need to admit, most of what people know comes from what they were taught. Really. Very few people are real students of the Word themselves. And even if they are, they study with that brain that's a Baptist brain, or a Lutheran brain, or a Pentecost brain, or a non-denominational brain, whatever it is.
Right.
So he says, for what human-minded, carnally infected person can perceive this whole salvation? From the fallen condition man had digressed to, except the spirit mind, except the mind of Christ in himself. See, I hear Paul say, know you not that you are the very most holy place of God? And people would say, no, I didn't know that. Therefore, in this way, the great salvation of our Father is not understood by even one carnally minded man, woman, boy, or girl, except by leaning to the mind of Christ. That's the only way people are going to understand. And that's what I've been trying to teach here at this fellowship, is how to lean to the mind of Christ. And I'm learning myself. And so as I learn, I teach, and we all grow together. And so it's the mind of Christ, or the Spirit placed in all of us, of our Father. Verse 12. Now we have received, not going to receive, right? It says we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God. When did we receive that, family? It happened in Jesus' resurrection, and He sent the very Spirit, or the quickening mind of Christ in all mankind. And we have it. It belongs to us. It says, now we have acknowledged and received. Now, so He's talking to people that are growing up now. He's talking about the Apostle Paul, and he said, we have the mind of Christ now, and we could say this ourselves. Now we're beginning to receive this stuff. It's not that I have it, but I'm receiving it. So he says, now we have acknowledged and received not mental disposition of carnal intellect, but the mind of Christ, being one with Father, that we might properly see, consider, and know the great salvation, pardon, and rescue graciously given to all by Father. Now, I want to read this real quick, and we may recap it next week. You can read the King James later. But verse 13, the same we teach, explain, and preach not, something said of man whose understanding comes from the five sense realm teaching. In other words, we don't teach that. But which Spirit teaches. We're only going to teach what Spirit teaches. Comparing spiritual understanding with carnal. In other words, we're going to show you the truth, and we're going to compare it to the carnal. The carnal is not the truth. Law-minded works of flesh understanding. Verse 14. But the central-minded man understands not the great salvation, or receives the great salvation, that is only revealed by the mind of Christ within. For the things Jesus did in His redemptive work are silliness and absurdity unto Himself. I read yesterday on Facebook that they say that Jesus did not die, that Jesus did not become human. They think it's silly that He died, that you couldn't even think that Jesus could die spiritually. They do, and they sounded so precious and so sweet teaching it. That's not true. Jesus became 100% human, and He suffered the deaths of all humanity. Neither can He be aware, that central thinking person, or perceive, or speak of, or understand, because they are divinely discerned. But the spiritual-minded man discerns and understands the great salvation of our Father. Yet he himself is scrutinized of no man, and that says judged of no man. And you know what that means? When you know who you are, nobody can judge you.
That's right.
Paul told Timothy, a workman will never be ashamed if he will study himself and show himself that he's approved of God. So once you know who you are, you do not stand in the judgment seat of sensually minded men.
That's right.
For what man whose understanding comes from the five sense realm is aware, can perceive, and understand the intellect of Father Himself. In other words, you can't do it yourself. But we who have awakened to these truths hold in possession ability and permanence, infinite awareness of our anointed mind.
Yes.
And in Ephesians 2:2, before Jesus' great work of salvation, man lived and was occupied in the lower central realm of ages past. Out of the central life realm of the then Prince Adam, who was to rule and reign as the plural of Father. The mental disposition that is illegally active in the immature and understanding offspring of the corrupt and understanding religious systems of this age. The people, because of not been taught truth, are still living as they did before the cross. They're still living as human even though they're not. So Paul was explaining that many, after Jesus' redemptive work, were still thinking only of earthly things, and their vision was still affected, their vision was clouded, and if one does not know or understand his relationship with Father, they're still going to live out of the five sense realm. And then it says in verse 3 of Ephesians 2, among whom also we all once conducted ourselves in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind. So this is what we used to do, but now we're not going to live out of that false characteristic anymore. Because why? Because I'm going to teach you the truth. That's what the Apostle Paul was saying, and that's what I'm saying. If you try to fulfill the law or with the arm of flesh, in other words, it's a work. It's nothing but you try it, which is a dead work. What comes from that is fear, doubt, confusion, lies, and the list can go on and on and on. So I say the Apostle Paul in chapter 2 was saying this is what man used to live like, and if you continue to follow religious teachings, you'll still live that way. But if you lean to the Spirit, you have or you possess the mind of Christ. We already have the mind of Christ, but we must possess it. Amen? Go ahead and stop it, Doctor. I hope that helps you. I didn't write a lot of commentary. I was going to use verse 16, but the Spirit of the Lord just said I want to translate that whole chapter, and it flowed. So
Sure did.